Hey guys, tonight we step into the vast, untamed heart of North America, long before Columbus tripped over the New World. Picture yourself standing on a windswept plain, the grass whispering secrets under your feet as a herd of buffalo thunders in the distance. The air smells of sage and earth, and somewhere nearby, a tribal fire crackles, sending sparks into a star-choked sky. You're not just a visitor here. You're living in a world where Native American tribes thrive, their cultures as diverse as the landscapes they call home. From the Iroquois in the northeast to the Lakota on the Great Plains, life pulses with tradition, trade, and a deep connection to the land. But, spoiler alert, you probably won't survive the upheaval that's coming when outsiders arrive. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with your location and local time. I'm curious where you're drifting off from tonight. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're standing in a world that's been alive for millennia. The land stretches endlessly, rolling prairies, dense forests, jagged mountains, and rivers that carve stories into the earth. The people here, the Native Americans, aren't a monolith. They're hundreds of nations, each with distinct languages, customs, and ways of life. In the southwest, you see the ancestral Puebloans carving homes into cliffs, their stone villages glowing under the desert sun. Up north, the Haudenosaunee, or Iroquois Confederacy, govern through a sophisticated system of councils, balancing power like a political tightrope act. Out on the plains, you spot Lakota hunters tracking buffalo, their movements as precise as a choreographed dance. These societies aren't static. They trade, innovate, and adapt. Corn, beans, and squash, the three sisters, feed millions, a farming trick so clever it makes modern kale fads look lazy. But let's zoom in. You're with a Cherokee family in the southeast, their wooden longhouse buzzing with activity. The women weave baskets so tight they hold water, while the men prepare for a hunt, joking about who'll miss the deer this time. Laughter carries on the breeze, but there's a rhythm to this life. Ceremonies, stories, and a spiritual tie to the land that feels like breathing. You try their cornbread. It's warm, crumbly, and better than anything from a box mix. A quirky tidbit. Some tribes, like the Cherokee, used blowguns for small game. Imagine taking down a squirrel with a glorified straw. Silent, deadly, and honestly kind of hilarious. Historians still argue whether the population of Native Americans before contact was 10 million, or closer to 50 million across the Americas. The debate's murky because disease and conquest erase so much evidence. But what's clear is this. You're in a world of complexity. Trade routes crisscross the continent. Shells from the Gulf Coast end up in Montana, copper from the Great Lakes in Georgia. It's like an ancient Amazon, minus the 2-day shipping. You notice kids playing a game with sticks and a ball, a precursor to lacrosse, and it's brutal. Makes modern rugby look like a pillow fight. You wander to a coastal village, where the Powhatan fish with nets so fine they catch moonlight. They're drying fish for winter, and you're offered a piece. It's smoky, chewy, and not half bad. Life here feels sustainable, balanced, but there's a catch. These tribes don't know it yet, but across the ocean, ships are already setting sail. You can almost hear the creak of wooden hulls, a sound that'll change everything. For now, though, you're safe, wrapped in the hum of a world that's been thriving forever. The fire's dying down and the stars are brighter than any city skyline. You pull a woven blanket tighter, wondering how long this peace can last. You're still standing on native soil, but the air feels different now, heavier, like it's holding its breath. The year's 1492, and you're at the edge of a Taino village in the Caribbean, where the first European boots are about to hit the shore. You see them, Columbus and his crew stumbling onto the beach, their eyes wide with greed and wonder. The Taino greet them with curiosity, offering fruit and woven mats, but you can tell this isn't going to end with a friendly potluck. The Europeans' armour clanks, their swords gleam, and you're pretty sure that shiny helmet isn't for sun protection. You're witnessing the spark of contact, a moment that'll ripple across the continent like a stone dropped in a still pond. The Taino, with their fishing nets and thatched homes, think they're meeting strange travellers. You watch them trade gold trinkets for glass beads, and you want to yell, "Hold out for a better deal!" But this isn't a fair exchange. Columbus writes in his journal that these people are so naive they'd give anything for nothing, a mainstream fact that makes your stomach turn. The Taino don't know they're being sized up for exploitation. You wander north, where other tribes will soon meet similar strangers, Spanish, French, English, all with their own agendas. In Virginia, you see Powhatan fishermen eyeing English ships. In Massachusetts, Wampanoag hunters whisper about pale men with floating islands. The vibe's shifting from curiosity to caution. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some early Europeans thought Native Americans were mythical creatures, like mermaids or centaurs, because their cultures seemed so alien. Imagine a sailor scribbling, "Saw a man with feathers, might be half bird." Ridiculous, but it shows the gap in understanding. You're with a Wampanoag elder now, who's teaching you to plant corn with a fish buried underneath. Fertilizer genius that makes modern gardeners look like they're just playing in dirt. But the elder's wary. He's heard rumours of bearded men who don't share food, a bad omen in a culture where generosity is strength. You move west, where the Spanish are already poking around the southwest. You're in a Pueblo village, adobe walls warm under the sun, when conquistadors roll in demanding gold. The Pueblans offer hospitality, but the Spanish aren't here for tacos. They're obsessed with cities of gold. Think El Dorado fan fiction. Historians still argue whether the Spanish exaggerated these myths to justify their conquest, or genuinely believed they'd find streets paved with glitter. Either way, you see the Pueblans' confusion as their sacred kivas are ransacked. You try to blend in, helping grind corn, but the tension's thick. A kid nearby mimics the Spanish accent and you stifle a laugh. Humour's still alive even now. Back east, you're at a trading post where French fur traders barter with Algonquin hunters. The Algonquin drive a hard bargain, swapping beaver pelts for iron kettles. You try lifting one of those pelts. It's heavier than your last Amazon package. The French seem friendly, but their gifts, blankets, tools, carry a hidden cost. You overhear a trader boast about civilizing the locals, and you roll your eyes. Civilizing. These tribes have been running complex societies since Europe was burning witches. But the Europeans keep coming, their ships dotting the horizon like uninvited guests who don't RSVP. You sit by a fire with a Lenape family sharing roasted venison. It's tender, smoky, and beats any fast food. They tell stories of the trickster coyote, and you're lulled by their voices, the crackling flames. But you can't shake the feeling of a storm brewing. The Europeans' arrival isn't just a visit, it's the start of something unstoppable. You pull your cloak tighter, the night air sharp, and wonder how long these fires will burn before everything changes. You're knee-deep in a bustling native trade network, the air thick with the scent of pine and smoked fish. It's the early 1600s, and you're at a crossroads where tribes like the Huron and Iroquois swap furs, shells, and stories like it's the world's oldest flea market. You're holding a wampum belt, its beads woven with more precision than your last attempt at knitting. These belts aren't just pretty, they're contracts, histories, currency. But the Europeans are muscling in, and you can feel the vibe shifting from barter to betrayal. The French and Dutch are here, waving shiny axes and cloth, but their smiles don't reach their eyes. You're about to see how trade turns into tension, and tension into something uglier. The Huron are trading beaver pelts with the French, and you're impressed. Those pelts are softer than your favourite hoodie. The French want furs for Europe's hat obsession. Apparently beaver hats are the 17th century equivalent of designer sneakers. A mainstream fact. By 1600, the fur trade is pumping millions of pelts across the Atlantic, making tribes like the Huron key players in a global economy. But it's not all win-win. You notice the Huron are getting hooked on European goods, kettles, knives, booze, and it's tilting the balance. You try bartering for a copper pot, but your handful of shells gets you a smirk instead. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tribes started using European coins as jewellery, not money, because who needs cash when you've got wampum? You see a Mohawk warrior sporting a Spanish coin as a pendant, and you can't help but grin. It's like wearing a credit card as a necklace. But the mood sours fast. The Iroquois armed with Dutch guns are flexing their muscle, raiding rivals to control the fur trade. You're caught in a skirmish, ducking behind a tree as arrows zip past. It's chaos, and you're thinking, this is why I don't camp. Historians still argue whether the Iroquois push for dominance was driven by European weapons or their own strategic genius. The Confederacy's council system is like a masterclass in diplomacy, but guns from the Dutch are tipping the scales. You're with a Mohican trader now, paddling a canoe down a river, the water so clear you see fish darting like tiny comets, He's nervous, muttering about Iroquois raids. You help paddle, your arms burning, and he jokes that you're slower than a turtle with a hangover. You laugh, but the tension's real. Trade routes are turning into battle lines. You stop at a Lenape village where women are pounding corn into flour. You try it, and your hands blister faster than you'd like to admit. They offer you a bowl of hominy, warm and nutty, and you're grateful for the break. But the talk around the fire is grim. European traders are pushing deeper, demanding land for debts. The Lenape are starting to see their forests shrink, their hunting grounds carved up. You overhear a Dutch trader haggling, offering rum for land, and you want to spill his barrel. The addiction to alcohol is creeping in, fraying tribal unity like a cheap sweater. You wander to a Chesapeake Bay oyster roast, where Algonquin families share stories and shellfish. The oysters are briny, perfect, and you're tempted to stay forever. But the English are nearby, building forts, and their tobacco fields are gobbling up land. The Algonquin are wary, their bows close at hand. You feel the ground shifting under you, like the earth itself knows what's coming. The trade that once connected tribes is now a wedge, splitting alliances and sparking fights. You wrap yourself in a deerskin blanket, the night chilly, and listen to the fire crackle. It's still peaceful, but you know it won't last. You're standing in a quiet village, the air heavy with the scent of damp earth and burning wood, but something's wrong. It's the mid-1600s, and you're among the Wampanoag in what's now Massachusetts, watching a community unravel. Smallpox is tearing through like a silent wildfire, and you can't shake the feeling of dread. Families huddle in their homes, faces etched with fear, as fever and sores claim lives faster than any war. You're seeing the devastation of disease, a shadow cast by European contact that's reshaping native life before your eyes. It's not just a tragedy, it's a turning point, and you're right in the middle of it. The numbers are staggering. Smallpox, measles, and influenza, brought by European sailors, wipe out up to 90% of some tribal populations in the 1600s, a mainstream fact that hits like a gut punch. You walk through the village, stepping carefully around empty homes. The Wampanoag, once 1,000 strong, are burying their kin, their songs of mourning blending with the wind. You try to help, carrying water to a feverish elder, but your hands feel useless. The survivors are gaunt, their eyes hollow, and you're struck by how fast a world can crumble. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tribes, like the Cherokee, use sweat lodges to fight illness, believing steam could purge evil spirits, kind of like an ancient sauna with spiritual vibes. You're invited into one, the heat intense, herbs stinging your nose. It's soothing, but no match for smallpox. You emerge, dripping, and a kid nearby jokes that you look like a drowned raccoon. You chuckle, but the laughter fades fast. Disease doesn't care about courage or rituals. Historians still argue whether Europeans knowingly spread disease, like with infected blankets, or if it was mostly accidental. The debate's heated because evidence is spotty, but you see the aftermath either way. You're with a Narragansett trader now, his voice low as he describes whole villages gone silent along the coast. He's lost half his family, and you feel the weight of his grief. You help him stack firewood, your arms aching, but it's something to do, a way to push back the helplessness. The trade routes. Remember those wampum belts from before? They're faltering now, as tribes shrink and survivors struggle to rebuild. You move south, to a Cherokee town nestled in the Smoky Mountains. The forest is alive with birdsong, but the mood is grim. Smallpox has followed the trade paths, and you see children with scars, survivors of a plague they can't name. You're offered a bowl of bean soup, warm and hearty, but the cook's hands tremble. She's lost her sister. You eat slowly, savouring the meal, but your mind's on the empty seats around the fire. The Cherokee are adapting, using their knowledge of herbs, but it's like fighting a tsunami with a bucket. Out west you hear whispers of disease hitting the Puebloans, carried by Spanish missions. You visit a mission, its adobe walls stark against the desert sky, where priests preach salvation while smallpox spreads. A Pueblo woman mutters that the Spanish god must be angry, and you nod, unsure what to say. She slips you a piece of flatbread, spicy with chilies, and you smile. Food's still a small comfort. But the missions are crowding the land, and disease is thinning the people. You notice a young boy carving a wooden bird, his focus unbroken despite the chaos. It's a flicker of resilience, but you wonder how long it'll last. The night settles in, cold and clear, and you wrap yourself in a borrowed blanket, the stars above sharp as knives. The fires are burning low and the villages feel smaller, quieter. Disease has carved a wound deeper than any sword, and you know the worst is still coming. You listen to the soft hum of a lullaby, a mother soothing her child, and you hope they'll see the dawn. You're trudging through a dense forest in the early 1700s, the air thick with pine and the distant smoke of a colonial settlement. You're with a Shawnee family, their village tucked along a river, but the horizon's changing. European settlers are creeping closer, their log cabins sprouting like weeds. You feel the land shrinking, the once endless woods now dotted with fences and fields. The Shawnee are wary, their bows close at hand, and you're caught in the slow grind of colonial encroachment, where every step forward feels like a step toward loss. This isn't just about land, it's about a way of life slipping through your fingers. A mainstream fact: by the early 1700s, English colonies like Virginia and Massachusetts had ballooned, with over 250,000 settlers claiming native lands along the eastern seaboard. You see it firsthand: clear-cut forests, tobacco fields choking out hunting grounds. You're helping a Shawnee hunter track deer, your boots sinking into the mud, but the game's scarce now. He grumbles about settlers scaring off animals, and you nod, trying not to trip over a root. His kid tags along, tossing pebbles, and jokes that you walk like a drunk bear. You laugh, but the mood's heavy. Hunting's harder when your territory's being carved up. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some settlers thought native trails were so well worn they must have been made by magical spirits, not people. You're on one now, smooth as a highway, and you get why they'd think that. It's like the forest's own GPS. But these paths are leading settlers deeper, and you see their wagons rolling in, loaded with tools and dreams of ownership. The Shawnee are pushed to negotiate, but every deal feels like a trap. You sit in on a meeting where a colonial official offers beads and rum for land. You want to whisper, ask for something that lasts. But the Shawnee elder's face says he already knows it's a raw deal. Historians still argue whether native tribes could have slowed encroachment by uniting early against settlers, or if the sheer numbers made it inevitable. You're not sure either, but you feel the pressure. You're at a Delaware village now, where women are weaving baskets, their fingers flying like they're racing time. You try weaving, and it's a mess. Think tangled Christmas lights. They laugh, calling you all thumbs, and you take it in stride, grateful for the moment of lightness. But the talk turns to settlers demanding more land, their farms eating up sacred sites. The Delaware are debating whether to move west or stand their ground, and you feel the weight of their choice. You wander to a Chesapeake Bay Algonquin camp, where the air smells of oysters and salt. You help shuck some, your fingers slipping, and an elder teases that you'd starve in a storm. The food's amazing. Roasted fish, corn cakes. But the conversation's grim. English planters are draining marshes for rice, pushing the Algonquin to the edges. You see a young couple sketching maps in the dirt, planning a new route to safer lands. It's smart, but it stings. Moving means leaving ancestors' graves behind. You think back to that wampum belt from the trade days. It's still a symbol of connection, but now it's a reminder of what's being lost. Night falls, and you're by a fire, the crackle blending with the hum of crickets. The Shawnee elder shares a story of the trickster rabbit outsmarting a wolf, and you smile, but your mind's on the settlers' lanterns glowing in the distance. The land's still beautiful, stars bright, river murmuring, but it's not the same. You pull a deerskin blanket tighter, the chill creeping in, and wonder how much longer these fires will burn before they're pushed out. The elder's voice fades, and you're left with the weight of a world being reshaped, one fence at a time. You're sitting cross-legged in a smoky longhouse, the air thick with the scent of cedar and tension. It's the mid-1700s, and you're with a Cherokee delegation, quill in hand, about to sign a treaty with British colonists. The parchment promises peace, trade, and boundaries, but the ink feels like it's sealing something else, betrayal. You're deep in the era of treaties, where words on paper are supposed to protect native lands, but often crumble under the weight of greed. The Cherokee elder next to you looks skeptical, and you can't blame him. You're about to see how these agreements, meant to build trust, turn into traps. A mainstream fact: by the 1700s, hundreds of treaties were signed between native tribes and European powers, with over 500 documented by the US government alone by 1850, most broken or ignored. You're holding the treaty now, its wax seal still warm, but the British official's smile is colder than the river outside. The Cherokee are ceding a small chunk of land for guns and cloth, hoping it'll keep settlers at bay. You try to read the fine print, but it's dense. Think terms and conditions for a sketchy app. The elder mutters that promises are like smoke. They look solid until the wind blows. You nod, feeling the weight of his words. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tribes, like the Iroquois, used wampum belts to ratify treaties, turning beads into binding vows. Way cooler than a notary stamp. You see one on display, its patterns telling a story of peace, but you know it's fragile. The British are already eyeing more land, their surveyors creeping closer. You're invited to a feast to celebrate the treaty, and the venison stew is rich, smoky, and better than any takeout. A young Cherokee jokingly offers you a second bowl, saying you look too skinny to survive winter. You laugh, but the mood shifts when talk turns to settlers ignoring the new boundaries. Historians still argue whether native leaders signed treaties out of strategic hope or desperate necessity, knowing colonial expansion was relentless. You feel the dilemma firsthand. You're with a Creek delegation now, negotiating with the Spanish in Florida. The air's humid, mosquitoes buzzing like tiny drones. You swat one, and a Creek woman teases that you're fighting the wrong enemy. She's right. While you're slapping bugs, settlers are building forts on Creek hunting grounds. The Spanish promise protection, but their forts are more about control than alliance. You help carry baskets of corn to the meeting, your back aching, and notice the Creek warriors' tense grips on their bows. You move north to a Mohawk village, where another treaty's being discussed. The firelight dances on the faces of elders debating whether to trust the French or English. You're offered a piece of cornbread, crisp and warm, and you savour it while listening. The Mohawk know both sides are playing them, promising land rights while settlers plough through. You think back to that smallpox-ravaged Wampanoag village, disease-weakened tribes, making these treaties feel like deals with a loaded gun. A young warrior cracks a joke about the English smelling like wet dogs, and you snort, but the laughter fades as another treaty is signed, its promises already fraying. Night settles in, the stars sharp above the longhouse. You're wrapped in a blanket, the fire's glow fading. The Cherokee elder shares a story of a turtle carrying its home, a reminder to hold fast to what matters. But you see the surveyor's marks on nearby trees, and you know the land's being sliced up, treaty or not. The promises feel as thin as the parchment you signed, and you wonder how many more will be broken before the ink dries. You pull the blanket tighter, the night's chill sinking in, and listen to the river's murmur, hoping it carries some answers. You're crouched in the underbrush, heart pounding, as war cries echo through the forest. It's the late 1700s, and you're with a Shawnee war party, paint streaked across their faces, ready to push back against the tide of settlers flooding their lands. The American Revolution is raging, and native tribes are caught in the crossfire, forging resistance to protect their homes. You're not just a bystander, you're in the thick of it, feeling the pulse of defiance as tribes like the Shawnee, Iroquois and Cherokee take a stand. The air smells of gunpowder and pine, and you're about to see what happens when diplomacy fails and survival means fighting. A mainstream fact. During the American Revolution, many native tribes, like the Iroquois Confederacy, split allegiances, with some siding with the British and others with the Americans, hoping to secure their lands. You're with Shawnee leader Tecumseh's kin now, their bows and stolen muskets ready. They're raiding a settler outpost, and you're along for the ride, trying to keep up without tripping over roots. The settlers' cabins burn, and you feel the heat, but this isn't victory, it's desperation. You dodge a stray bullet thinking, this is why I'd never make it as a warrior. A young fighter grins, saying you look like a scared rabbit, and you manage a weak laugh. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some native warriors painted their faces with red ochre to scare enemies, believing it channeled spiritual power, like war paint with a side of psychological warfare. You see it now, the Shawnees' faces glowing in the firelight, and it's intimidating, even to you. But the settlers keep coming, their numbers swelling as the revolution fuels land hunger. You're at a council fire where Lenape and Delaware leaders debate joining the fight. The air's thick with tobacco smoke, and you're offered a pipe. Your first puff leaves you coughing like a rookie. An elder chuckles, saying you're better at breathing than fighting. Historians still argue whether native resistance could have halted colonial expansion if tribes had united more fully, or if the settlers' sheer numbers made it a lost cause. You feel the tension as the council debates. Some want to ally with the British, who promise to curb settler greed. Others trust neither side. You help carry water to the camp, your arms aching, and overhear a warrior say the British are as trustworthy as a fox in a henhouse. You nod, remembering those broken treaties from before, their wax seals as useless as expired coupons. You move to a Cherokee stronghold in the south, where warriors are planning a raid on encroaching settlers. The mountains loom like silent allies, but the Cherokee are outnumbered. You're handed a bowl of hominy, warm and comforting, and a woman teases that you eat like it's your last meal. You smile, but the truth stings. Every fight feels like a last stand. The Cherokee strike at dawn, and you're there, heart racing as arrows fly. It's chaos, but there's strategy too. Their knowledge of the land outsmarts the settlers' clumsy militia. Night falls, and you're back at the fire, the crackle blending with distant owl hoots. The Shawnee share stories of ancestors who fought off rival tribes, their voices low and steady. You wrap yourself in a deerskin blanket, the cold biting your fingers, and think of that wampum belt from the trade days, now a symbol of resistance. The fight's far from over, but each raid buys time, not triumph. You stare into the flames, wondering how long these warriors can hold the line against a world that's closing in. You're trudging through a muddy valley, the air sharp with the scent of blood and smoke. It's the late 1700s, and you're with a mixed band of Iroquois and Cherokee warriors, their faces grim as they navigate a world torn by war. The American Revolution has ended, but for native tribes the fight's just heating up. Settlers are pouring west, and the British and American promises to protect tribal lands are unravelling faster than a cheap scarf. You're in the heart of the colonial native wars, where alliances are shaky and every battle feels like a roll of the dice. The ground's littered with broken arrows, and you're wondering if you'll make it through this one. A mainstream fact: the Northwest Indian War of the 1780s and 1790s saw tribes like the Shawnee and Miami form the Western Confederacy, winning major victories like the Battle of the Wabash in 1791, where they crushed a US army. You're with a Miami warrior now, his musket slung across his back as you scout a settler fort. The plan's to hit fast and fade into the forest, but the tension's thick. You're not exactly built for guerrilla warfare. A young scout spots your clumsy steps and whispers you're louder than a spooked horse. You smirk, but your heart's racing as you crouch behind a tree, the fort's lanterns glowing like predator eyes. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some tribes used owl hoots as battle signals, mimicking the night sounds to coordinate attacks, nature's own walkie-talkie. You hear one now, a low hoot, and the warriors move like shadows. The raid's swift, sparks flying as the fort's supplies burn, but you know it's a temporary win. The settlers rebuild and their militias are getting better armed. You're handed a piece of dried venison, chewy and salty, and a warrior jokes that it's tougher than your courage. You laugh, but the truth stings. Each fight drains the tribes, their numbers thinning from war and disease. Historians still argue whether native alliances with the British, like during the Revolution, strengthened their resistance or just delayed the inevitable US expansion. You feel the bind as you sit at a council fire with Shawnee and Delaware leaders. The British supply guns but demand loyalty, while the Americans offer peace talks that feel like traps. You help stack firewood, your hands splintered, and overhear a Delaware elder say both sides are two snakes with the same venom. The fire's warmth is a small comfort, but the debate's heated. Fight on or negotiate? You think back to those smallpox-ravaged villages, the scars still fresh. You move to a Cherokee camp in the south, where tensions with American settlers are boiling over. The forest's dense, alive with cicadas, but the mood's grim. You're helping repair a bow, your fingers fumbling, when a woman teases that you'd shoot yourself before an enemy. Her humour's sharp, but her eyes are tired. Raids are constant now, and families are hiding in the hills. The Cherokee strike a settler caravan at dawn, and you're there, heart pounding as arrows whistle. It's fierce, but the settlers' numbers keep growing, their forts sprouting like mushrooms after rain. Night settles in, the stars half hidden by smoke. You're wrapped in a blanket, the fire's glow fading as the warriors clean their weapons. A Shawnee elder tells a story of a bear outwitting hunters, a nod to their own guerrilla tactics. You think of that wampum belt from the trade days, now a relic of fading hopes. The wars are grinding down the tribes, their alliances fraying under pressure. You pull the blanket tighter, the night's chill seeping in, and listen to the forest's hum, wondering how many more battles this land can bear before it's lost. You're walking a dusty trail, the sun blistering your neck, as you join a Cherokee family forced from their home in Georgia. It's the 1830s, and you're on the Trail of Tears, a brutal march driven by the US government's Indian Removal Act. The air's thick with sorrow and the creak of wagon wheels as thousands are herded west, their lands snatched for cotton fields and gold. You're carrying a bundle of blankets, your arms aching, and the weight of this moment feels heavier than anything you've seen. This is displacement on a massive scale, and you're living every grueling step of it. A mainstream fact, the Indian Removal Act of 1830 led to the forced relocation of over 60,000 Native Americans, with the Cherokee alone losing about 4,000 people, nearly a quarter of their population, during the Trail of Tears. You're trudging alongside a mother clutching her child, their faces etched with exhaustion. The soldiers bark orders, their bayonets glinting, and you keep your head down, trying not to draw attention. The trail's littered with abandoned belongings, pots, shawls, a child's toy, and you step carefully, feeling like an intruder in someone's nightmare. A boy nearby tries to lighten the mood, joking that your dusty face looks like a raccoon's mask. You force a smile, but it fades fast. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Cherokee hid in the Appalachian Hills, evading removal by living like ghosts in caves. Think survivalist hide-and-seek with stakes higher than any reality show. You hear whispers of these holdouts, and it gives you a flicker of hope, but the reality in front of you is grim. The trail stretches endlessly, the Mississippi River a distant goal. You're handed a piece of hardtack dry as cardboard, and a woman teases that it's better than starving, but not by much. You chew slowly, your throat dry, and think of the lush Cherokee fields left behind, now claimed by settlers. Historians still argue whether President Andrew Jackson's removal policy was driven more by economic greed or racist ideology, though most agree it was a brutal mix of both. You feel the policy's bite as you pass a sick elder, too weak to walk, carried on a makeshift stretcher. You offer your water, but it's barely a sip, and the guilt stings. The Cherokee's homes, log cabins, schools, even a newspaper press, are memories now, replaced by this endless march. You think back to those broken treaties, their wax seals as fragile as promises whispered in the wind. You're at a river crossing now, the water cold and muddy. The soldiers push the group forward, and you help a young girl wade through, her hands trembling. She's quiet, but her eyes tell a story of loss you can't unsee. The group's numbers are shrinking. Disease, hunger, and cold claim lives daily. You hear a mournful song, soft and steady, as the Cherokee honour their dead. It's beautiful, haunting, and you wish you could do more than listen. The soldiers don't care. They're counting heads like livestock. Night falls, and you're huddled by a small fire, the air sharp with frost. The Cherokee share what little they have. Cornmeal mush, bland but warm. An elder tells a story of a star guiding wanderers home, and you cling to the hope in his voice. You think of that wampum belt from the trade days, now a distant symbol of sovereignty. The trail's a scar on the land and the people, and you wrap your blanket tighter, the cold biting deeper than the soldiers' stares. The stars above feel far away, and you wonder if they'll ever guide these people home again. You're sitting on a hard-packed dirt floor, the air stale with dust and despair. It's the 1840s, and you're on a reservation in what's now Oklahoma, where the Cherokee and other removed tribes are trying to rebuild after the Trail of Tears. The land's unfamiliar, flat, dry, nothing like the lush hills they left behind. You're surrounded by makeshift shelters, the echoes of loss in every face, as native families carve out a new existence, in a space that feels more like a cage than a home. This is reservation life, and you're learning what it means to survive when the world's been pulled out from under you. A mainstream fact, by the 1840s, the US government had forced over 100,000 Native Americans onto reservations, often on marginal lands unfit for farming or hunting. You're helping a Cherokee woman plant corn, but the soil's stubborn, like it's fighting back. She shows you how to mound the earth, her hands steady despite everything. You try, but your rows look like a toddler's scribbles, and she teases that you'd starve a village with that technique. You laugh, but the humour's thin. Food's scarce, and the government's promised supplies are late if they come at all. You think of those trade routes from centuries ago, now cut off, replaced by dependence on unreliable handouts. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Cherokee kept their syllabary, a writing system invented by Sequoia, alive on reservations, scratching it into bark or cloth, basically their own secret code to defy cultural erasure. You see a young boy practicing the symbols, his focus fierce, and it's a spark of defiance in this bleak place. But the reservation's reality is harsh. You're handed a bowl of thin gruel, barely edible, and a man jokes it's government gourmet. You force it down, your stomach grumbling, and notice the children's gaunt faces. The land's too small for hunting, and the promised tools haven't arrived. It's like being handed a puzzle with half the pieces missing. Historians still argue whether reservations were designed to protect native tribes or to clear valuable land for settlers, though the outcome, confinement and control, speaks for itself. You feel it as you walk the reservation's edges, marked by crude fences. Beyond them, settlers' farms sprawl, their cattle grazing where buffalo once roamed. You help repair a leaky roof, your hands blistered, and overhear elders debating whether to adapt to this new life or resist. The younger ones talk of farming like settlers, but the elders cling to old stories, like that turtle carrying its home from the treaty days. You wish you could tell them it'll get better, but the soldiers patrolling nearby say otherwise. You move to a Choctaw reservation nearby where the air smells of dust and distant rain. The Choctaw are rebuilding too. Their stickball game's a flicker of the old life. Think lacrosse with higher stakes. You try joining in, but you're winded in minutes, and a player laughs saying you run like a three-legged dog. The game's a brief escape, but reality creeps back. Smallpox lingers, and the promised schools are just tents with no teachers. You think of those smallpox-ravaged villages from before, the scars still fresh. The Choctaw are teaching their language in secret, defying the soldiers' glares. Night falls, the sky vast but heavy. You're by a small fire, the flame struggling against the wind. A Cherokee elder shares a story of a bird rebuilding its nest after a storm, and you hold on to the metaphor, thin as it feels. The reservation's a far cry from the vibrant villages of old, but there's a quiet strength here, in the way people share what little they have. You're trudging through a muddy valley, the air sharp with the scent of blood and smoke. It's the late 1700s, and you're with a mixed band of Iroquois and Cherokee warriors, their faces grim as they navigate a world torn by war. The American Revolution has ended, but for native tribes, the fight's just heating up. Settlers are pouring west, and the British and American promises to protect tribal lands are unravelling faster than a cheap scarf. You're in the heart of the colonial native wars, where alliances are shaky, and every battle feels like a roll of the dice. The ground's littered with broken arrows, and you're wondering if you'll make it through this one. A mainstream fact, the Northwest Indian War of the 1780s and 1790s SS saw tribes like the Shawnee and Miami form the Western Confederacy, winning major victories like the Battle of the Wabash in 1791, where they crushed a US army. You're with a Miami warrior now, his musket slung across his back as you scout a settler fort. The plan's to hit fast and fade into the forest, but the tension's thick. You're not exactly built for guerrilla warfare. A young scout spots your clumsy steps and whispers you're louder than a spooked horse. You smirk, but your heart's racing as you crouch behind a tree, the fort's lanterns glowing like predator eyes. You wrap your blanket tighter, the cold seeping through, and listen to the fires crackle, wondering how long this forced confinement can hold a people who've always been free. You're sitting in a cramped boarding school dormitory, the air heavy with the smell of starch and despair. It's the late 1800s, and you're with native children, Cherokee, Lakota, Navajo, torn from their families and sent to places like Carlisle Indian Industrial School. The US government's new plan isn't just to take land, it's to erase native identity, reshaping kids into something civilized. You're watching their braids cut, their traditional clothes swapped for stiff uniforms, and it feels like a theft deeper than any treaty's broken promise. You're in the heart of cultural erasure, and every moment stings with forced forgetting. A mainstream fact, by the 1890s, over 20,000 native children were enrolled in government-funded boarding schools, where the motto, "Kill the Indian, save the man," guided efforts to strip away language, culture, and identity. You're helping a young Lakota girl scrub floors. Her hands raw from lye soap. She's quiet, but her eyes burn with defiance. You try to lighten the mood, joking that the floor's cleaner than your cooking skills, but she barely smiles. The teachers enforce English-only rules with a switch, and you wince at the crack of punishment. You think of that Cherokee syllabary scratched into bark on the reservation. Now it's forbidden here. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some kids hid tiny tokens of home, like beads or feathers, under floorboards, a secret rebellion against the school's rules. Think of it as smuggling culture in plain sight. You spot a boy tuck a small stone carving into his shoe, and you nod silently, respecting his quiet fight. But the pressure's relentless. You're in a classroom now where a teacher drills the kids in English, erasing names like Running Deer for John Smith. You're asked to read loud, and your stumble over words earns a stern glare. A Navajo girl whispers you sound like a lost sheep, and you chuckle, grateful for her spark in this grim place. Historians still argue whether boarding schools were more about assimilation or outright cultural genocide, though the trauma left behind leans heavily toward the latter. You feel it as you walk the dormitory, where kids sleep in rows like soldiers, not siblings. You help a Choctaw boy mend his uniform, your stitches as crooked as a drunk sailor's path. He teases that you sew worse than his grandmother's dog, and you laugh. But the moment's fleeting. The kids are taught to farm or sew like settlers, not to hunt or weave like their ancestors. You think of those wampum belts from the trade days, now museum pieces, their stories silenced. You're at a school festival, a mockery of native traditions where kids perform sanitized dances for white visitors. The crowd claps, but you see the kids' forced smiles, their spirits caged. You're offered a bland biscuit, government rations, and you choke it down, wishing for the hominy of old. Outside, a Cherokee girl teaches you a forbidden word in her language, whispering it like a secret code. It's resistance, small but fierce, and you admire her courage. The school's walls feel like they're closing in, stripping away everything that made these kids whole. Night falls, the dormitory cold and quiet. You're by a window, the moon casting shadows on sleeping faces. An elder's story from the reservation echoes in your mind, that bird rebuilding its nest after a storm. These kids are trying, hiding their culture in whispers and hidden trinkets. You wrap your thin blanket tighter, the chill biting, and listen to the soft breathing around you. The school's trying to erase a people, but you see sparks of resilience, flickering like embers in the dark, waiting for a chance to burn bright again. You're riding across a windswept plain, the grass swaying like an ocean under a wide sky. It's the 1870s, and you're with a Lakota war party, their horses' hooves drumming a fierce rhythm. The Great Plains are a battleground now, as tribes like the Lakota, Cheyenne and Arapaho fight to protect their lands from US soldiers and settlers chasing gold and railroads. The air smells of dust and sage, and you're caught in the Plains Wars, where every clash feels like a desperate stand for survival. Your heart's pounding. You're not exactly warrior material, but you're here, gripping the reins and hoping you don't fall off. A mainstream fact, the Plains Wars, spanning the 1860s to 1870s, included battles like Little Bighorn in 1876, where Lakota and Cheyenne forces under Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse defeated Custer's 7th Cavalry. You're with a Cheyenne scout now, his eyes scanning the horizon for bluecoats. You're trying to keep up, your horse snorting at your clumsy riding, and he jokes you look like a sack of potatoes on hooves. You laugh, but the tension's thick. Soldiers are closing in, their forts sprouting like thorns across the plains. You spot buffalo skulls bleaching in the sun, their herds nearly gone, slaughtered to starve the tribes. Here's a quirky tidbit. Some Lakota warriors tied bells to their horses' tails during raids, the jingle adding chaos to scare settlers. Think of it as psychological warfare with a musical twist. You hear the faint chime now as the war party moves, and it's eerie, like wind chimes in a ghost town. But the odds are brutal. You're at a camp where warriors clean stolen rifles, their faces painted with that red ochre from the Revolution days. The US Army's relentless, backed by telegraphs and trains, and you feel the noose tightening. You help carry water, your arms burning, and overhear a young warrior say the soldiers fight like ants with guns. Historians still argue whether the Plains tribes could have won a prolonged war if they'd had more guns or allies, or if the US's industrial might made defeat inevitable. You feel the weight of that question as you sit at a council fire with Lakota elders. They're debating whether to fight or seek peace, but peace talks have burned them before. Those broken treaties keep haunting you. You're handed a piece of pemmican, greasy and tough, and a woman teases that you chew like a cow with no teeth. You grin, but the mood's heavy, hunger's creeping in as buffalo vanish. You move to a Comanche camp where riders practice lightning-fast raids, their horses moving like they're part of the wind. You try mounting one, and it's a disaster. You're on the ground faster than a bad Tinder date. The warriors laugh, but their eyes are sharp, watching for soldiers. The Comanche hit a supply train at dawn, and you're there, heart racing as arrows fly and dust clouds rise. It's a victory, but a small one. The army keeps coming, their cannons louder than any war cry. You think of that smallpox village, the scars still raw, and now starvation's another enemy. Night falls, the plains vast and quiet. You're by a fire, the flames dancing as a Lakota elder tells a story of a buffalo spirit guiding warriors. You wrap your blanket tighter, the cold sharp, and think of that wampum belt from the trade days, now a fading dream of freedom. The plains wars are a blaze of resistance, but the fire's burning low. You listen to the wind, carrying the distant howl of a coyote, and wonder how long these warriors can ride before the plains fall silent. You're standing on a frozen hill, the wind biting through your clothes as snow dusts the ground. It's December 1890, and you're at Wounded Knee Creek in South Dakota, surrounded by Lakota families huddled under thin blankets. US soldiers encircle the camp, their rifles glinting in the pale light, tensions crackling like ice underfoot. You're witnessing the Wounded Knee Massacre, the brutal end of armed native resistance in the Plains Wars. The air smells of fear and gunpowder, and you're caught in a moment where hope feels like it's slipping away forever, leaving only grief in its wake. A mainstream fact: on December 29th, 1890, the US 7th Cavalry killed over 200 Lakota men, women and children at Wounded Knee, a slaughter sparked by a misinterpreted ritual and a single shot. You're with a Lakota elder now, his hands trembling as he tries to calm his people during the ghost dance, a spiritual movement promising renewal. The soldiers misread it as a war cry, and you feel the misunderstanding spiral. You're helping distribute meagre rations, hard bread, barely edible, when a soldier barks at you to move faster. A young girl nearby whispers, "You look like a spooked deer," and you manage a weak smile, but the air's heavy with dread. Here's a quirky tidbit. The ghost dance shirts, woven with sacred symbols, were believed by some Lakota to stop bullets. Think of it as spiritual armor in a desperate time. You see one now, its patterns bold against the snow, but it's no match for the soldiers' Hotchkiss guns. The shooting starts suddenly, a deafening roar, and you drop to the ground, heart pounding. Bodies fall around you, the snow turning red, and you're frozen, helpless. You think of those plains warriors, their bells jingling on horseback now silenced. The massacre's chaos is over in hours, but the devastation feels eternal. Historians still argue whether Wounded Knee was a deliberate act of genocide or a tragic escalation of fear and miscommunication. You see both sides in the aftermath, soldiers piling frozen bodies, some claiming orders, others looking haunted. You help a survivor, a young boy, wrap a blanket around his shivering sister. Your hands shake, and he murmurs you're clumsier than a newborn colt. His attempt at humour breaks your heart more than the cold. The Lakota are disarmed, their camp a graveyard, and you feel the weight of a resistance crushed, not by strategy, but by sheer brutality. You move to a nearby hill, where survivors gather, their voices low with mourning songs. The wind carries their grief, and you're offered a sip of watery soup barely warm. You choke it down, thinking of the pemmican from the Plains Wars, a distant memory of strength. The soldiers watch, their faces unreadable, and you notice a Lakota woman hiding a ghost dance shirt under her shawl, a quiet act of defiance. You think of that Cherokee syllabary scratched in secret. Small rebellions that keep the spirit alive, even now. Night falls, the sky a cruel, starless black. You're by a smouldering fire, the cold sinking into your bones. A Lakota elder shares a story of a star falling to earth, sparking new life, but his voice is faint, like he's trying to convince himself. You wrap your blanket tighter, the massacre's images burned into your mind. Wounded Knee feels like the end of something vast, a wound deeper than the land can bear. You listen to the wind's howl echoing the cries you'll never unhear, and wonder if these embers of resistance can ever reignite.